Thank you, Mrs. White, for agreeing to be interviewed.
My name is George, and this is Phoebe.
We believe you have a story about your grandfather in World War I. Please would you share it with us?
I would love to. My granddad, he was in the medical corps during the First World War, and he worked on a train. He was not in a hospital. The train moved around, I'm not exactly sure where, but I know that I've got some pictures. Mrs. Wilson will show you the pictures later of the train. And he told me a funny story about how they moved along the train. You couldn't go from one carriage to the other like you can in a modern train. They had to go along the outside of the train, and they did this while it was moving along, which sounds quite dangerous to us, but I don't think the train was going very fast. And he said he only fell off once, so he didn't get hurt. And he also was a very keen sportsman. He played football for the army in about the time of 1918, and this here is a photograph of him and his team meeting the Prince of Wales then. Now the Prince of Wales now is Prince Charles, so this is the son of the king that he was meeting there.
How much did you know about him?
I did know quite a lot about him. I'll show you this picture now, because this picture's got me in it with him. This is they always lived where they live now, and opposite where my parents live now, so opposite, just opposite the paper shop and along a bit, there's an old building, and that used to be the forge where they made shoes for horses. And this picture is I'm the very smallest child there in my granny's arms with curls, and my sisters, there's Mrs. Burrows there as well, and that's my granddad, this same man, so I knew him a little bit. I can pass that one round. That was taken in 1961, I think. I'm not sure, 61. Must have been 61, because that's when we moved here. So he lived into the 1960s. Even though he was in the war, he lived right into the 1960s.
Thank you very much, Mrs. White. This is Phoebe and George ending the interview with Mrs. White on October 15th, 2014.
Thank you, Mrs. Wilson, for agreeing to be interviewed.
My name is Megan and this is Ella.
We believe you have a story about your grandfather in World War I.
Please would you share it with us?
Certainly, thank you very much for inviting me. Here is a picture of my grandfather on my father's side. He was my father's father. And in World War I, he was in the East, and he was in Egypt. He was defending a small town in Egypt, and he was up the top of a bell tower with his gun aimed out of one of the arches, when suddenly a bullet entered the bell tower, struck the bell, and then struck him on the head, and he fell down, presumed dead. He was taken then to the basement of the church, where he was laid with all the other poor dead people. Luckily, somebody was going by the row of dead bodies when they noticed my grandfather moving, and he was taken immediately by camel to the nearby hospital. Now, in order to be taken by camel, he was laid across the camel in a sling with another body, another person, the other side. And as he was going along, he tried talking to the other person. And he told us when we were children that the other person didn't speak to him. And it wasn't until he got to the hospital that he realised that he'd been balanced across the camel with another dead person. In the hospital, his wound was seen to, and he was discharged and sent back to England to recover. Now, my grandfather was a very, very typical grandfather, with a bald head surrounded by a ring of grey curls, and in the middle of his bald head was a small cavity that we used to say to him, "Grandad, Grandad, please can we put our thumb in the hole in your head?" And he used to let us. So that's the story of my grandfather in World War One.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Wilson. This is Ella and Megan ending the interview with Mrs. Wilson on October the 15th, 2014.
Thank you, Mrs. Gibson, for agreeing to be interviewed.
My name is Annabelle and this is Liam. Can you tell us about your own school experience in the village?
I was born during the war in 1941, so I didn't start school till the end of the war in 1946. I went to school at Wakering Primary, which is in the High Street, the old school, and I enjoyed school. I enjoyed Wakering School. It was a very nice little school, very nice.
What time did school begin and end?
School began for us at 9 o'clock in the morning, and when we were very small and we just started school, we finished at 3. Then after about 2 years it changed to about 3:30.
What were your lessons like?
Our lessons were very interesting. I enjoyed the lessons. We had a blackboard in front of us where the teacher wrote on the blackboard, and we had exercise books, and we copied our notes down in our exercise books.
How was your classroom arranged?
We had wooden desks with wooden benches, and the desks were all in nice straight rows and facing the blackboard, and the teacher stood in front of us.
Did you have to wear school uniform?
No, we didn't wear school uniform. We just wore our ordinary everyday clothes.
Were the teachers nice to you?
The teachers were very nice, but they were very strict, and we really had to behave ourselves. If we were talking in class, we were sent out and had to stand outside the door.
Were there any rules?
Yes, there were lots of rules. We had to obey all the rules. We weren't allowed to talk in class to the person sitting next door to us, or we might be sent to the headmaster and had to sit outside his room until he came out and took us in and, told us off. He was very angry with us.
What did you play at playtime?
We played skipping and a game called 5 stones. Do you know 5 stones? Where you had 5 stones and you throw them up in the air and try and catch them on the back of your hand. And we played chase. We used to chase each other round and round the playground.
Did you enjoy school?
I enjoyed school, yes, very much.
Any to share with us?
Because it was the end of the war, we had what they call air raid shelters in the playground, and they were very dark. They had no windows in, because that's where you went if there was any bombs being dropped in the area. And at the end of the war, they left the air raid shelters there in the playground, and we used them as bicycle sheds.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Gibson.
This is Liam and Annabelle ending the interview with Mrs. Gibson on October the 15th, 2014.
Thank you, Mrs. Rodnell, for agreeing to be interviewed.
My name is Mairead and this is Tiana. Can you tell us anything about your school experience in the village?
Yes, I started the old school in 1951, and I remember vaguely the teachers were very, very strict in those days. We really had to do as we were told. And I remember the boys, the playgrounds were divided, so the girls were one side and the boys were the other. We couldn't sort of mix at all. I've got some horrible memories. I remember one evening we were all ready to go home, and we all had our bags on the back of our chairs, and one of the boys had lost a toffee bar or something, so we all had to wait behind while all our bags were searched, which didn't bother me because I knew I hadn't touched it. Blow me, when they got to my bag, somebody had obviously sneaked it in my bag, and so I really got told off for that. And I remember Mum walking me to school, and I used to cry all the way because I didn't like it, I didn't want to go. In those days, our mums were allowed to come up the gate and watch us play out in the playground, which I didn't like that because I didn't like it when they went. And but at night when it was time to go home, I used to cry all the way home because I didn't want to go home.
Where did you go to school?
I went to the old school down the community centre now until 1957, is it? When this school was built. I was 11 and I was a new one in this school when it first opened.
What time did the school begin and end?
9 o'clock till 3:30.
What were your lessons like?
Oh, not too bad. I remember doing maths and English, but not much more. But I used to like English. I always liked English.
Did you grow up in Wakering Village, and can you tell us anything about your home life when you were the same age as us?
Yes. Well, actually, I was born in London, but I came down to Wakering when I was about 6 weeks old. I lived in Landwick Cottages, which I loved because there was like a whole group of us all at the same age, and I used to love it down there. We were flooded in 1953, so we had to move out, and we went to stay with a family in Alexandra Road till their houses were all dried out and decorated again. And that's one of the main things I remember.
Is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
And then when they built the council houses at Oliver's Crescent, which used to be an orchard, we all moved up there, and that's when I came to this school. And I enjoyed it up this school, I really did, because I stayed actually on to do shorthand typing because I liked it so much. Yes, and then when I left I got a job as a secretary. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Rodnell. This is Tiana and Mairead ending the interview with Mrs. Rodnell on October the 15th, 2014.
My name is Emmy and this is Jamie.
Can you tell us about your own school experience in the village?
Yes, I started school during the war because I was born in 1940, and I had to go to school started school really at the end of the war in 1945. We played with sand trays in the infants, and one day little wooden sand trays with a pointer, and you drew pictures with this pointer in the sand tray. And one day we were supposed to shake them when we'd drawn our picture. Instead of that, I blew in the sand tray and I got sand in my eye, and I cried and cried, and the teacher smacked me because I wanted to go home to my mum and she wouldn't let me, so she smacked me, and I've never forgotten that.
Where did you go to school?
I went to Great Wakering Primary School.
What time did school begin and end?
It started at 9 o'clock and finished at 3, but we also had about an hour and a half at lunchtime where we went home to our mums cooked dinners, and we went home and had our lunch and walked back to school.
Okay. What were your lessons like?
We had religious instruction, history, geography, maths, English, singing. Later on we had domestic science. I think that's about it really.
How was your classroom arranged?
It was in lines, usually desks of two together. We had wooden desks with inkwells, and we had nibs and pens to write with, pens with nibs on to write with.
Did you have to wear school uniform?
No, there were no school uniforms then. I brought my school photographs to show you. You can keep them so you can see how we used to dress in those days.
Were the teachers nice to you, or were they strict?
They were very friendly, but they were also very, very strict. Our headmaster used to live in the house adjoining Great Wakering School, and he used to walk across the playground with a cane in his hand, and we were all frightened of him.
Were there any rules?
Oh yes, obviously there were rules about behaving yourself. You had to stand in lines and be filed into the classroom when the bell went.
What did you play at playtime?
We played with marbles, the boys had cigarette cards and they used to flip them over. You'd probably never seen a cigarette card because they're not in cigarette packets anymore. Marble skipping, hopscotch, that sort of thing really.
Do you have anything else you'd like to share with us?
Not really, I don't think. Let me have a look here. Oh, we didn't used to take our books home. We had our own desks, and you kept your books in the desk. So, and when you had to do a different lesson, the teacher moved round to the classroom that you were in. You didn't have to take your books home, and that's how it was laid out really. And we didn't have homework either in those days.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Lloyd. This is Jamie and Emmy ending the interview with Mrs. Lloyd on October the 15th, 2014. Thank you, Mr. Street, for agreeing to be interviewed. My name is Megan and this is Bethan. Can you tell us about your own school experience as a child in the village?
Yeah, I went to the tiny school at Barling, just down the road. Not the school now, but the old school. And I started school when I was 5, and that was in 1940, just at the beginning of the Second World War. Barling School then had 4 classrooms and 4 teachers, although it taught children from the age of 5 to 14, because at that time everybody left school at 14, not 15, 16 or whatever. So we started school. There was 4 classrooms. Each teacher taught 2 or 3 years. They might teach. The headmaster taught. He was a teacher as well. He didn't sit in an office tucked away. He was a teacher and taught the top 3 years from the age of 11 to, or the age of from 14, 13, 12, 11. That's it. 11 to 14. How we did it, I don't know, but we did learn our 3 R's. We did come out learning things, but in the meantime, there were air raids going on, enemy bombs were dropping, and air raid shelters were built in the school playgrounds and on the school field. And if you go to the old school down the road, there's still a couple of air raid shelters in the playground there. So if the air raid sounded, which was a siren that wailed, we all went into the air raid shelter and tried to learn there. When the all clear went, when it was just one strident note, we all went back in the classroom.
What shops were in your village when you were our age?
A lot, actually. I can't give you a number, but I know I'll go back a bit before then, before 1940, and in 1913, which was just about 100 years ago, there was something like 90 shops in Great Wakering and Little Wakering, Barling. Awful lot. And there were 3 bakers, for instance. They all had their own bakehouse, all baked their own bread, all had a shop, all sold their own bread, and in addition they used to deliver. I remember one right at the other end of the high street, which was run by the Cooper family, and one of them still alive. They were all named Robert, grandfather, father, son, and they used to deliver bread with a pony and trap. There were an equal number of butchers, just one down the road now, but then there was at least 3, perhaps 4 butchers, greengrocers. Then whatever you wanted in Great Wakering you could get, because not many people had motor cars, just to pop off to the supermarket and get everything you wanted in one go. But you could walk down the high street and get just about everything you wanted.
Where did you go to play?
To play? Because we had a playing field at the school at Barling. In addition to that, there was the recreation ground just up the road and across the road behind the sports centre. That was there in the war. There was another little playing field at Little Wakering that they called the Parish Meadow, or more commonly called the Parry. That was beside the Castle Public House. You just go down, it's still there. There weren't as many facilities then. There weren't swings and roundabouts and all sorts of things. There was just a patch of grass. Really, you had to make your own play. Apart from that, we played in the street. There were very little motor cars, so we used to play cricket, football, all sorts of things in the street. If a car came, we all used to run out of the way.
Did you have any best friends?
Yeah, I had a lot of best friends, because then basically Wakering was a very close-knit community. You know, going to Southend was a treat, an event. If you actually got on the bus and went to Southend with your mum or whatever, that was a big deal, you know. So yeah, I had a lot of friends, and I was born in what they called them Victory Cottages, which is Little Wakering Road. I was born at number 16, for instance, but they're all numbered in the road now, and that's now number 79 Little Wakering Road. And that was a row of what they called council houses then, which today you'd call social houses, and we were really one big family. You know, we just wander in and out of each other's houses and play in each other's house or in their garden or whatever. But the things, you know, there was no televisions for a start. Televisions were unheard of. Radios, we used to have a thing called a crystal set, which was a little crystal with what had a cat's whisker, and you had to touch the crystal in the right place with a cat's whisker to get a radio program. Nobody had telephones. You know, if you wanted something, you used to go knock on their door and tell them. So yeah, it was very, very close knit. We used to have a lot of fights as well as good times, you know, but yeah, I had a lot of friends.
We think you were the village policeman at one time. Can you tell us about that?
I wasn't actually the village policeman. I was a police sergeant who, what they called a section sergeant, and I first joined the police force in 1958, which was now 56 years ago. And after I travelled round about, I first joined in Southend, which was then its own borough force, and then we amalgamated with Essex. In, I think it was about 1977, I became a section sergeant, and I covered Great Wakering, Little Wakering, Barling, Shoebury, Foulness, parts of Thorpe Bay, but there were two constables who actually lived in Great Wakering. Just the other side of the doctors, there was two police houses built where two police officers lived with their families, and in the middle was the police office, and they were responsible for all policing of Great Wakering. They had what they called 24-hour responsibility. They didn't just work, say, 8 hours and then pack up. If at 2 o'clock in the morning something happened, they were tipped out of bed to go and deal with it. So if they wanted to leave Great Wakering to, say, go to Southend shopping, they had to ask their sergeant permission to leave their beat, and the beat was what was called an area that the policemen worked. So I was their supervisor, if you like, so I used to come and see them, although I've always lived in Wakering, although I didn't actually police Great Wakering at the lowest level. I was one level up, if you like.
Is there anything else about our village in the past that you would like to share with us?
Well, our village has changed considerably. You know, when I was young, there were not hardly as many houses, not hardly as many people, not hardly as many cars, and it was really, I have to be careful what I say because I might upset somebody, but it was a more, I have to say, a more friendly village where you could walk down the high street and know everybody and say hello to everybody, whereas now I can walk down the high street and maybe know 2 or 3 people instead of 200 or 300. Okay.
Thank you very much, Mr. Street. This is Bethan and Megan ending the interview with Mr. Street on October the 15th, 2014.
Thank you, and for agreeing to be interviewed. Can you tell me about the Heritage Centre? Can you tell me about life on the island 100 years ago?
Right, the Heritage Centre used to be the school, and it was built in 1846 for the school children here. The extension was added years later because we had more and more children. Life here was hard. The children, when they came to school, had to walk across tracks. There was no made roads. They had to walk in mud and dirt, and they were wet, and there was no heating, no central heating. There was just a stove in the middle of the room, and they used to hang their coats round the stove to try and get them dry. But they sat all day in wet, muddy feet and tried to learn. Summer holidays were spent on the farm, helping the farmers with their crops. We all went to church. Every one of us went to church if we were here, twice a day sometimes, and all the children went to Sunday school on Sundays.
Do you know where they all went to church?
If the farmer went to church that your family worked for, he expected to see his farm workers and their children in church on Sunday mornings, and if they weren't, he would ask questions on Monday morning as to why they weren't there. So to avoid an irate farmer, you went to church.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and this is Megan Peake ending the interview with Anne on July the 16th, 2014.
Well done.